And we are live here from mtnDAO, and I have a special guest from a project today building and bridging interest-bearing assets from Anchor over to Solana. So specifically, this project has notably won the Terra track in the Serum X Wormhole Convergence Hackathon. And today I have a core contributor, Robert, joining me today. How's it going, man?
Sweet. Yeah, it's going good. How are you?
It's amazing. It's been great to watch you guys really. I guess I got to see you guys tie up a lot of Soluna. You guys were finishing it up here at the mtnDAO and really put your entry in. I think you already had your entry in for the most part, but it was great to just watch this whole back end or the end of the process here where you guys got to submit it and actually won a track in the hackathon. So just to lay some context, do you want to just explain what Soluna is and the goal behind it?
Yeah, for sure. Soluna is effectively a protocol um, that is on top of the wormhole messaging system. So you have contracts that are deployed on Terra and Solana, and what it effectively does is it figures out a way to bridge Anchor UST over to Solana. While actually splitting the principal token, which is the UST, from the yield that's accruing to that token, and putting it into a sort of community-owned DAO.
Yeah, so that's awesome. You guys are really bringing, in very layman terms, bringing anchor yields over to Solana, but there's a little bit more than that, which makes it exciting. Really, just it touches on what the Terra track was for the hackathon, growing the use case of Terra. So I think it's really great. And even just to lay some more context, like what were the beginnings behind this? Was this something where you saw the Convergence hackathon and you're like, oh, this would be great, and it makes a ton of sense to do this, and just get like some background on all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the background is actually kind of exciting. So a little bit of context. So Kyle and I are the core contributors to Soluna, but Kyle and I are also core contributors to Mobius, which is the leading stable swap exchange on Cello. And the funny part about Cello is at that time the leading DEX was UbeSwap, which was created by the no other the man, the myth, the legend, Ian and Dylan. And
Okay.
so Ian and Dylan later moved on to the Solana ecosystem to create their stable swap exchange called Saber. It's been a huge hit, and they've been able to effectively deploy capital through their investment vehicle called Ship Capital. I would say starting January, Ian was nice enough to allow us to come to San Francisco to work on this project that he effectively had the idea for. He back then he called it the Anchor Dollar, Kyle and I were really excited because we had this. In January we were coming to the Solana ecosystem. We had a lot of excitement around Solana. We wanted to be engaged in the community. We wanted to figure out a way to sort of enter the community, and he essentially told us, "Look, the Anchor Dollar needs to be built. The Convergence Hackathon is ending in 4 weeks. Let's try to do something here," and that's what we did.
Yeah, that's really amazing to hear, especially just how you guys have ventured into the ecosystem and you have experience before.
Yeah.
What do you think brought you to this? Like, well, you just told us what brought you there. So I guess the better question is how has it been now building in the Solana and Terra ecosystems, as opposed to maybe other chains? Do you just what's the feel on the building in these networks and around these ecosystems? I mean, I know you've been to a couple hacker houses, so you've been getting a good feel of the actual ecosystem.
Yeah. So the ecosystems are very different. Um, so a little bit of context here too. I think Ethereum is is really like the way I like to see it is like the Linux operating system, right? And Solana is sort of like Mac OS. And you see there's a huge difference in the type of developers, and then also the sort of variety in people. I think Ethereum appeals to a broader spectrum of people, which is really fantastic. And I think Ethereum, the base chain, has seen a ton of innovation. But one of the sad truths to EVM is there's been a lot of forked chains, right? I mean, there's a ton of forked chains out there, and there's a lot of porting of contracts, which has a lot of merits because it also spurs innovations, but you also have a lot of not so cool things that happen out of that. Where Solana has such a high barrier to entry that you attract a ton of high quality developers, and then the cool thing too is because Solana has such fast transaction finality and sort of this broad spectrum of data consistency, you see a lot more financial applications on Solana than you would maybe on other chains, because that's really what Solana is well built for. So you see a lot more high quality developers, if I can say that, but then also you see a lot of TradFi people.
Yeah, and just to echo that, I mean, this is something we've been seeing in the past 6 months and longer, honestly. The talent pouring into Solana, having these massive ecosystem hacker houses and bug bounties, it has really brought a ton of developers. And this was something I was mentioning the other day as well, where it's like you are just seeing all of these developers come in, and it's almost like a leading indicator. You need good dApps for users to use them, and we're already just seeing a massive influx of innovative dApps. To jump on here and kind of build on this, was the learning curve hard, building pretty much composability between Terra and Solana? I know they're both in Rust, but it'd be great to just touch on the idea of building this composability. Also, how important you think just DeFi Legos are in general. I think this has been a reoccurring conversation where it's just like people are able to build on top of things. So I'm curious how that's been for you coming into the ecosystem.
Yeah, so I think for Kyle and I, we personally see composability as the biggest asset to blockchains. Um, So, you know, building things on chain has the very unique benefit of being composable with other applications. So you think about like liquidity providing shares and the value that liquidity providing shares have brought to things like yield farming and a host of different applications. And I think for our application specifically, what we effectively do is we try to compose the money market on Terra, which we see as sort of the most liquid and most well adopted money market in the broader DeFi ecosystem. And we're composing that with Solana. So yeah, we absolutely see the value in composability, and that's what really our application effectively does. It extends this layer of composability.
That's awesome. On the topic of composability, there is sort of a double-edged sword here. I'm curious, is it something that crosses your mind of building on top of other smart contracts and just smart contract risk in general? How do you guys tackle this issue? It's not something that's perfect and it's reoccurring. There's human error in everything. So we see over and over, even with massively audited projects, some of the biggest auditing firms still see things slip through. I
Yeah.
think things like the wormhole hack were a massive wake up call. How do you guys go about smart contract risk, and what are your thoughts on composing with other smart contracts?
Yeah, so that's a really good question because that is something that I probably don't even have a really good answer to because smart contract risk, and there's sort of this variety of opinions on it, but smart contract risk essentially is compounded when you add protocols on top of each other, right? And that's a really unfortunate thing because composability is sort of the biggest value add. The really, really good news to smart contract risk is that there's this really broad belief, and I think it's called the Lindy effect, that the longer that the protocol stays online while not being hacked, and the more TVL it has relative to its sort of timeline, the less likely it is going to be hacked because it's sort of time tested. And so far, that's principle has held true. And I think for the case of our protocol, because we're effectively built directly on on Terra and the Anchor protocol on Terra, and because it's such a well time tested protocol, we feel very comfortable with sort of the risk that we're inheriting.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. That's actually something I've thought about and talked about in the past. As contracts are on the market and market tested more,
Yeah,
it does create, like you're saying, this Lindy effect where the more value that's in these contracts and the longer on there, it's giving some sort of vote of confidence from investors. And I think it's just important to touch on, just as the space grows, I think smart contract security will become less and less of a risk. But right now, it definitely is something that users should take into account. And I think it's just important that users start to wrap their head around what it is, because I think it can be daunting to a lot of people. And there is no perfect solution right now, but something, just understanding the risk, understanding the Lindy effect, seeing how much other capital is trusting these contracts. These are not foolproof by any means, but it's better than just jumping in a protocol that spun up maybe a day ago and has no TVL. And so that's something that I just think about: how long has this protocol been around and how much value are other people putting in? So I think that's really interesting to touch on. And just to move forward really more into Soluna, because I think this is where things get exciting. We touched on this base idea of the composability you guys offer and how important composability is. Before we jump over, I was talking to Tristan from Zeta Markets, and you just touched on how the composability has allowed innovation to just spur incredibly fast, where people are able to build things like basic fundamental tooling and then have other developers not really have to fight in the trenches, but build off top on top of them and build something innovative and really pushing capital efficiency and opening up finance to people. So that was just another thing I wanted to tack on there for composability. But I'm curious, really getting into Soluna's composability, what are the different angles of the protocol? So to my understanding, you guys have Sol UST. So this is pretty much the core currently. Do you want to touch on how this all works and what you do with Sol UST?
Yeah, that's a good question. So SolUST, like you correctly said, is our attempt to essentially bridge the anchor yields on Terra over to the Solana ecosystem. But the really unique part about SolUST, and it's one of the things that really gets us excited about it, is it's actually a fungible stablecoin. So it's completely tradable and exchangeable for UST or any other stablecoin asset on Solana. And that's really cool because all of a sudden you have this token that technically allows you to realize interest on it through our governance token, if that were to hypothetically come around. And at the same time allows you to use that as some sort of collateral or allows you to redeem it for some sort of other asset that you're buying. So SolUST allows you, in sort of simple terms, be a high velocity money, so money that can be exchanged relatively well, while also having the interest bearing properties that you want to have with something like AUST.
Yeah. And then I think there's also another layer here. I know we were talking about this early on, the fact of having things like liquidity pools on Saber do what you're saying, make more liquidity, make it more high velocity. There's also another layer on top of that, correct? You can be a liquidity provider there and earn yield on top of the interest you're earning that you've bridged over from Anchor, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that's something probably Kyle and Ian are probably most excited about is you can still have yield farming strategies on top of this. So right now, SolUSD is live on Saber, and it's earning a great interest on it because of the Saber rewards that are flowing to this. Then you have the potential for yield farming, where people are actively farming a governance token. And then on top of all of this, the Sol UST, because it's backed by Anchor UST 1-to-1, is still earning interest on Anchor. So you have this really well capitalized system that can be really fruitful for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's awesome. And really, to zoom out now, I know you guys have Sol UST. You're starting to get some Saber pools. TVL's picking up. I think you guys are crossing over 5 million, which is incredible. And then there's also just more liquidity. Having this high velocity, high liquidity profile is great. And it obviously, one of the biggest things is like the chicken and the egg, getting it started. So now it's like, okay, how does this continue to scale? And I guess the next thing is like, this seems like very much of the base for Soluna, what is the target market? How can this look to grow considering you guys are leveraging things like UST and Solana?
Yeah. So that is that is something that we've probably been focused most on is like how do we make SolUST the most integrated stablecoin on Solana? And I think the trick is, and we're effectively taking the model with other stable coins like Frax that have seen a lot of success. Um, and that is build as much liquidity behind SolUSD as possible. The more liquidity you build behind a stablecoin, the more trusting that stablecoin effectively can be. So it's sort of like the Lindy effect, right? If you have a protocol that is time tested and has a ton of TVL like Compound, you're more willing to put money in. And SolUST will inherit, I think, the same sort of principle where if you build enough liquidity behind it, it just becomes more usable because you know that you can exchange it. There's there's sort of greater liquidity guarantees right there. And then that also allows us to integrate with things like Solana Pay, which we hope to really bring out because that would be really fantastic having people pay money with their Sol UST or pay for assets with their Sol UST. And then at the same time, also kind of get this cashback reward feature that you see with credit cards. Because if you are a long term holder, you're still earning the interest rates on Sol UST.
Yeah, and that's actually incredibly cool considering the inflation environment we're in, and people are thinking like, how do
Yeah.
we beat this base 7% or around that ballpark inflation rate? So super interesting to see how this can grow and expand. And I think a big thing now is just understanding that Soluna is just looking to continue making prominence and creating use cases within the Solana ecosystem to start to establish that Lindy effect. It's not something that obviously comes overnight, but as you build and attract capital and really just let the market test the smart contracts, it starts to establish it more and more, which I think is really exciting. Also, how you guys are thinking how to attack this problem and move forward. And to shift gears here, just getting off of that, I think we covered Soluna pretty great in depth. We talked about how you guys are bridging assets, also keeping these interest bearing tokens, opening up more capital efficiency, and then also moving forward, what you guys are looking to do, how it's more than just, okay, we launched and we're here, how there's so many more use cases in the realm of leveraging UST and Solana. I'm curious to start to wrap this more up. We talked a bit about hacker houses. I'm just curious in general, what has this meant as a builder in the ecosystem? It seems like you've accrued a lot of experience for what maybe a lot of people would think is a relatively short time in crypto. Maybe for us it's felt like a while, but how's it been being a builder in these ecosystems and specifically more so coming to these hacker houses?
Yeah, I think the hacker houses have been huge. I think crypto, more than anything else, is a game of network effects. And that applies to things like protocols, but it also applies to things like social relationships, right? And I think that the more you can interact with people and the more you can work with people, the higher chances you have of succeeding based on network effects. And like for instance, I got to meet you a couple weeks ago, and you were nice enough to do sort of a shout out for SolanaNews, and I'm sure that helped us tremendously sort of gain more broader adoption. So the hacker houses have been huge. I think I'm personally going to try to go to as many ones as I can. I think one of the cool parts and about sort of this process I've been with crypto is, Kyle and I have been working on these projects for a while. I personally wouldn't have been able to see as much sort of experimentation and development in the space if it wasn't for me working with Kyle. So, everything to me is really like a function of network effects. If you work with people, the odds are just better.
Yeah, and I think it's great just coming here and seeing everyone working on the same thing in the space. And like you said, it's more so of a how do we add value to the entire ecosystem? We're all here with the same interests of really at the end of the day increasing adoption for web3 and crypto. So it's amazing having all these like-minded people together, concentrated, and it really
Yeah.
just comes down to, okay, how do we grow this pie together? How do we increase adoption, increase efficiency? So it's been amazing. This is actually my first hacker house, and just echoing what you're saying is
It's
like,
awesome, man.
yeah, I definitely want to just keep jumping around to these. And it's a great time and really just seeing what's building in the ecosystem. And then
Hmm.
on our rule, just giving people a platform, being able to talk about what they're building and really just get into all of that. And this is my last question here, super general. Probably have heard this one before, but I'm just curious, what is something maybe in the midterm you're excited for Soluna, and then also in the long term for just the crypto ecosystem as a whole, both maybe on Terra and Solana? So a little two-part question there.
Yeah, long term. So yeah, I'll split it up in two questions. So uh, for Zaluna, I think the long term future for Zaluna is really building as much liquidity behind Sol UST as we can. Like the way I like to think of protocols is they're just a bunch of liquidity pools. The more and stable coins are effectively liquidity pools denominated in some sort of price stable peg. And what's really cool is UST is probably one of the more decentralized US dollars, and that inherits really unique properties. And we want to sort of propagate that to the Solana ecosystem. And stable coins have also more variety use cases, so we want to sort of expand on those use cases. So yeah, long term build liquidity. Um, for the broader crypto ecosystem, I think that's really sort of tough for anybody to sort of predict, especially because of the pace of innovation.
Yeah.
But I think for me personally, what I'm particularly excited about, and I know that me and Kyle have been really excited about, is sort of seeing a more broader, universal on-chain exchange. So uh, just seeing more ways to actually transfer risk between individual parties and do it in a more capital efficient way. Because what DeFi really is just building finance on a blockchain, and that has really great composability properties. And right down to finance, there's more unique ways to transfer risk. And I think it's really up to DeFi for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years to figure out ways to transfer risk in a more capital efficient manner. And I'm really excited to see how that unfolds.
Yeah, I think that was very well put. And even just starting with the idea of Soluna, understanding that you guys are now working to build up this Lindy effect and make it a more predominantly used stable is great and makes a ton of sense. That's how we've seen a lot of these other projects and protocols really achieve success. And then on the aspect of just the fact that there is so much innovation and development that can still be seen in these ecosystems is amazing. And then tacking on to that, just what we were talking about, all the talent pouring in, it seems
Mm,
like it's going to be just really exciting to see what builds in the next 1 to 4 years. I don't think anybody can exactly, like you said, pinpoint what happens. It's just there's a lot of things aligning where there's a lot of capital entering in the space. People are excited about the innovation, but more importantly, there's tons of builders like you guys and everyone at this hacker house who is really jumping in. And it's like, okay, how can we push innovation here? And we're just seeing a ton of talent pouring in. So that really wraps it up for me, Robert. I just want to
nice.
thank you for coming on, touching on
Yeah.
Soluna. Yeah, it's been great watching you guys really just build and come to mainnet and now just moving forward off of that. So that really wraps it all up for me. And I just want to thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And I will sort of end with this note. We do have some ideas at Soluna on ways to sort of expand on our use cases. So we are going to be building protocols on top. If any of you guys are interested builders or excited about SolUST, please reach out to either me or Kyle or even Ian or Dylan, who are really nice guys about building those.
Yeah, that's amazing. And with that said, we'll wrap it up there. So just want to thank everyone for joining and peace out until next time.